Oh, please, after you. Hi, you're watching Source Material.
Or are you?
From Digital Spy.
Or are we?
This time we're heading all the way back to 2008 to take a look at the original Secret Invasion crossover event from Marvel Comics. We're going to give you a primer on the original comics background, why it came to be, some of the plot details, the 2022 reboot, and also what all of this might mean for Marvel's Disney Plus show. Secret Invasion's setup and some of the key events. Okay, so Secret Invasion comes out in 2008 and is written by Brian Michael Bendis and drawn primarily by Lionel Francis Yu. The comic's coming out really at the apex of Brian Michael Bendis' time at Marvel, really when he's at the height of his power. As a writer, he kind of made his name by kind of shepherding in the Ultimate Universe for Marvel at the start of 2000s, and specifically for his work on the Ultimate Spider-Man comic run, which has gone on to become one of Marvel's most popular comics. People absolutely love it, and for good reason. After his work with Ultimates and the Ultimate Universe, Bendis goes on to create the New Avengers run and the Secret Avengers, and he's kind of really responsible for some of the massive crossover events that defined Marvel's comic strategy in the early 2000s. So he's responsible for Civil War, obviously, which people adore, but also things like Avengers Disassembled and, for better or worse, House of M. On the art side, as we said, the comics are, or the primary kind of run of Secret Invasion is drawn by Lionel Francis Yu, who cut his teeth mainly on X-Men books throughout the 90s and then has gone on to do the same since. So the primary sort of plot beats of the Secret Invasion event take place in the titular 8-issue miniseries, but also they primarily extend to Bendis' other two comic runs at the time. That is New Avengers issues 38 to 47 and Mighty Avengers 14 to 20. Obviously, like we said, a lot of the kind of press at the time and the attention around Secret Invasion as an event is to do with the fact that all of these other Marvel books are tying into the event. X-Men's got its own things going on, Spider-Man's got its own things on. They've all kind of got this Secret Invasion imprint happening across 2008. It's worth saying that for me personally, I think if you're interested in the kind of comics origins of this story, you don't need to go back and read all of those tie-ins. Those New Avengers, Mighty Avengers, and the 8-issue mini are where the most of the kind of interesting storytelling happens. Before we get into the event itself, I think the other thing that's worth mentioning is that part of why I think the kind of legacy idea of Secret Invasion has endured so much is actually just down to some incredible covers from Gabriel Delotto. His work across the 8-issue mini is now quite iconic. You've certainly seen the cover of Secret Invasion #1, which is the kind of core Avengers team, but they're Skrulls. And what makes those covers so cool, beyond just their kind of really rich, painterly use of light and shadow and colour, is that a lot of those covers are homages to kind of previous iconic Avengers covers themselves. This is really true for the covers of the New Avengers books, which kind of go back through the events of that series and kind of retell them through this lens of oh, actually there are Skrulls there. So I think it's New Avengers 40 has this really cool version of the House of M, that really iconic House of M cover, but with kind of Skrulls in the place of some key characters. So I think iconography of the books in some ways outweighs maybe some of the narrative shortcomings of Secret Invasion as a story, which we'll get into now. Okay, so here is a whistle-stop tour through the events of Secret Invasion, the present-day events, because we don't need to do a whole recap of it. It came out 15 years ago, and actually part of my issues, and I think lots of fans' issues with the book, is that despite all of the hype and all the promise, there isn't actually that much to cover. Secret Invasion #1, the first issue in the mini, kicks off with the reveal that Elektra, who died in the issues a few months ago in New Avengers, has been a Skrull ever since she first appeared in that book and that team. We kind of see Tony Stark, Reed Richards, and Hank Pym all confronted with the fact that Elektra's a Skrull. What does this mean? Perhaps they've kind of been among them the whole time, and that's the first kind of seed of this paranoia as a theme that will persist, or will try and persist through the book. From there, essentially what happens is Tony gets a call that there's been a Skrull ship crash landing in the Savage Land, so he goes out there to kind of investigate what's going on. Meanwhile, Hank and Reed Richards continues to experiment on Elektra. It's revealed at the end of issue #1 that the Hank Pym that's in that book has been a Skrull for an indeterminate amount of time, and he kind of knocks Reed Richards unconscious and drags him away. Meanwhile, in the Savage Land, Tony is joined by a whole host of other Avengers, other heroes who are kind of all investigating the same thing. Turns out that Skrull ship crash landing was actually a decoy, because while they're there investigating that and getting into their own sort of scuffles, various kind of Skrull sleeper cells have been activated all over the world, and it is in fact the kind of dawn of a full-scale invasion of Earth by the Skrulls. So the ship that crash lands, the hatch opens, and basically like a bunch of heroes that have been missing or dead in previous issues of other books kind of all tumble out. Obviously, that means that not only are there heroes that our heroes who are there are kind of grieving, but also it sets up the kind of central visual conceit of the Secret Invasion miniseries, which is like you're going to have lots of panels of multiple heroes. So you've got like, there are 2 Spider-Mans in this scene, and which one's the real one? And basically this group of heroes is going to spend the next 2 or 3 issues in the Savage Land trying to work out, it's the classic like clone meme kind of standoff situation basically for 3 issues where no one knows if they're the real one or not. Tony gets kind of really badly injured, and we kind of see it all play out. And across those issues, we learn that Jessica Drew, aka Spider-Woman, has been killed and replaced, and the Skrull that is kind of impersonating her is the Queen Skrull at the time, Varanke, and she's up to no good, and it's her plan to kind of infiltrate Earth, take over all these positions of power, reveal that they've been like, they were the president the whole time, and all this stuff basically to kind of get the Skrulls embedded in as much as possible. So this is where like the kind of split of the narrative happens. Basically, you've got all of the heroes in the Savage Land fighting different versions of themselves that may or may not be Skrulls, and then over in New York, you've got a bunch of heroes who've remained, so people like the Thunderbolts, the Young Avengers. This is post-Civil War, so like the Initiative is a thing, which you don't really need to worry about ever. They're all fighting like weird Skrull versions of heroes in Central Park. S.H.I.E.L.D. has been taken over, or kind of S.H.I.E.L.D. has been disbanded and infiltrated by a Skrull posing as Jarvis, the Avengers assistant. He faces off against Maria Hill on a helicarrier in the rain, which is a really cool moment. One of the kind of few cool moments that Maria gets in this run, and kind of proving out that she's just like a badass. She has like a really cool trick she does with the life model decoy. It's all to say that some Avengers are in New York, some Avengers are in the Savage Land. Eventually they all come to New York to kind of confront the Skrulls one last time. One last stand, if you like, before they kind of take over the world forever. There's a couple of cool issues and pages here where we get lots of like panels of TV screens and news broadcasts with like Skrull messaging, which is really interesting. But the kind of climax of the story, and it's sort of an underwhelming climax, I think. You know, it's all this setup, and essentially what the comic boils down to is this kind of like big fist fight in Central Park. It's certainly a kind of a genre of comic that lots of people enjoy, but I think the promise of Secret Invasion was kind of all of this paranoia stuff, and what we end up with by issue 8 is this kind of like, do you want to see 2 Captain Americas punch each other? If you do, that's fine. But that's really what this comic boils down to. Are you still with us? So, the Secret Invasion 8-issue mini ends with the reveal that, as we said right at the beginning, Hank Pym has been a Skrull all along. He's infected Janet Van Dyne, aka the Wasp, with like this poison that makes her grow really... Basically, when she grows really big, she's like a poison bomb. It's very strange. And Tony takes her to like another dimension, and she dies. It's really silly comic stuff. And it means that they kind of save the day by getting rid of Janet Van Dyne, taking out the Skrulls, and they kill Varanke, the Skrull Queen, who was pretending to be Spider-Woman, Jessica Drew. So if that all sounds like a really big, weird story, and you're like, how the hell are they going to adapt that for the MCU? Then yes, I am also thinking the same thing. I think the thing to bear in mind about the version of Secret Invasion that we're going to see in the MCU is that we know it's going to be kind of like a more grounded Nick Fury story, and we know because of where we are in the MCU, in this kind of the start of Phase 5, everyone's sort of scattered to the wind. It's not going to be a show about huge cameos and huge fight scenes and teams of heroes, which is what the original run is. So what I'm hoping is that this Disney Plus show is going to pick up the kind of threads that are there around espionage and kind of the spycraft and the deceit, and be able to pull that into a more cohesive, interesting story. Part of the reason I'm confident they will be able to do that is because of the 2022 to 2023 Secret Invasion sequel reboot, or rebooquel, if you will. The 2022 rebooquel. Yep, that's right, I am channeling Scream 5. We're committing to the rebooquel as the term we're going to use for the Secret Invasion sequel comic, if you like, that came out in 2022 and just wrapped up its 5th and final issue in March of 2023. So ahead of the 2023 Disney Plus MCU series, Marvel released a kind of tie-in comic across 2022 to 2023 called Secret Invasion, which retreads some of the ideas of that original 2008 crossover, but puts kind of a fresh new spin on them. This, I think, was intended to be a sort of, again, kind of like what we're doing now, a kind of primer for people who were interested in maybe reading a comic about the ideas, but didn't necessarily want to go back and read all of the older stuff. We've seen Marvel do this with basically all of the big Disney Plus shows. We spoke about this in our She-Hulk video. Rainbow Rowell's kind of modern run on that character is at its 12th issue now, and ahead of kind of any of these MCU shows, Marvel tends to release like a mini or a new ongoing that can get new readers kind of interested. This new version of Secret Invasion is written by Ryan North and drawn by Francesco Mobili. Like we said, it's just 5 issues. It's a really easy read. It's really fun. I think Francesco Mobili's art is beautiful. It kind of has this like really nice texture to it, if that makes sense. I think the art that we spoke about, Lionel Francis Yu's kind of mid-2000s stuff, is like so glossy. Across those 5 issues, the book is essentially the kind of espionage, spycraft, tense, kind of deceit-filled story that we were hoping the original run is. It primarily stars Maria Hill, which is exciting. As we said, she's a great character, and we're excited to see what that character does in the MCU. And basically, the book revolves around the idea that Nick Fury is replaced by a Skrull near the start of the issues, and Maria Hill has to kind of work out how deep the rabbit hole goes. Tony Stark plays another kind of key pivotal role, as he did in the original, and it basically kind of takes some of the core ideas around, you know, who do you trust, what do you know, and kind of builds on them. It also does some interesting things with where the kind of Skrulls are now in Marvel continuity. So, like, back in 2008, you wrote a story about Skrulls, the Skrulls are the bad guys, it's like very clean cut, and that's not where we are now without spoiling things. And so this story takes the idea of like, are all the Skrulls kind of out for no good? What does that mean? How can you trust them? And builds on them across 5 really tight issues. So I would say if you're interested in reading a kind of comic ahead of watching Secret Invasion, then this kind of Ryan North, Francesco Mobili's Secret Invasion 5-issue mini is a really good place to start. What to expect from Secret Invasion on Disney Plus. Secret Invasion starts on Disney Plus on June 21st and is going to run for 6 weeks and 6 episodes. It's been written primarily and kind of created primarily by Kyle Bradstreet, who's probably most well known for his work on Mr. Robot, which is good and kind of is the kind of paranoia tense sort of show that we'd love to see Marvel do. As well as Kyle Bradstreet writing a lot of the episodes and show running. The show is primarily directed by Ali Salim. And judging by the trailers and press releases and what we know about the show so far, it's going to feature some returning cast members from the MCU that we're really excited to see. It's going to focus primarily, we think, on Samuel L. Jackson's Nick Fury, obviously, which is really exciting. Kobe Smulders is back as Maria Hill. As we said, that character just played a massive role in the kind of Secret Invasion sequel comic. So we're really hoping that as much as this is going to be a Nick Fury show, it's also maybe a Maria Hill show. We love Nick Fury, we love Samuel L. Jackson, but we have seen a lot of him over the past 10, 11, 12, 13 years. So it'd be really exciting to see Maria kind of get her due on screen. The show's also bringing back Ben Mendelsohn's Talos, the kind of main Skrull we've had in the MCU. We first met him during Captain Marvel, and obviously we last saw him during Spider-Man Far From Home, where it was revealed in the end credits that the kind of Nick Fury that we'd been watching throughout that movie was Talos, kind of as shapeshifted as him, and Nick Fury was kind of off-planet on a giant spaceship, which is really exciting. And then rounding out that returning cast is Don Cheadle back as Rhodey, who we'd love to see in MCU projects, and Martin Freeman is back again as Everett Ross, who we last saw in Wakanda Forever, a character that is getting, I think, more airtime on these movies and shows than we might expect. We love Martin Freeman, so we're kind of glad to see him there. I think if you remember during the events of Wakanda Forever, it was revealed that Everett Ross used to be married to Julia Louis-Dreyfus's Contessa Fontaine character, which is exciting. So maybe we'll see her as she's beginning to form the Thunderbolts, which we learned about in the Black Widow post-credit scene. Maybe we'll see her kind of in this series at some point. We wouldn't put it past them, given that she is kind of like a spy, CIA kind of operative. It would make sense, I think, for her to show up in this kind of story. But those characters that we love are also being joined by a whole host of new people, which we're excited to see. The big names that we've heard and kind of seen in trailers are Emilia Clarke is in the show as Gia, revealed to be Talos's daughter, which is very exciting. And alongside her, we've got Kingsley Ben-Adir, who's playing a character called Gravik, and Olivia Colman is in the show as a MI6 agent. So far, what we can tell from the trailers, basically, is that it does look like the Disney Plus show is going to lean heavily into kind of this dark, gritty, spycraft tone, which is really exciting. It's always been, I would say, an untouched area of the MCU. We've had glimpses at it mainly through like Natasha Romanoff and the Black Widow storylines around kind of, you know, secret organizations and how kind of paramilitary and kind of extra governmental organizations might interact in the world of superheroes and aliens. But it's exciting to see that be kind of treated as the main plot, as the A plot. The main cast and crew involved with the show have confirmed essentially that this series will be a lot more grounded than you might expect and a lot more kind of serious and tense as a Marvel project. Kobe Smulders, who plays Maria Hill, has described the series as, quote, a very grounded, on-this-earth drama that's dealing with real human issues and dealing with trust. Again, that's really exciting because, like we said with the original Source comics, the great promise of Secret Invasion is this like ratcheting tension of who do you trust? You know, all these people in this world have so much power. How do you navigate those relationships? How can you trust someone with your life if they might be kind of an alien in disguise? So excited to see that theme kind of come through in the show. Kevin Feige, the man himself, has said the series would serve as a follow-up to the story specifically of Captain Marvel, alongside its sequel, The Marvels, but was tonally different from those shows, or those movies even. That's exciting. I think it's easy to now forget that the last time we saw Skrulls really was in the Captain Marvel movie, and that's kind of where their story got expanded on. So it would make sense if this Disney Plus show was linked there and tied those stories up somehow. I think, you know, we last saw Brie Larson as Carol Danvers in the post-credit scene of Ms. Marvel, and obviously the tone of that show is like light and fun and poppy, and that looks like it's going to carry on through to the Marvels movie, which comes out later this year. So you can see how maybe tonally they won't be completely tied together, but hopefully we get a little bit more understanding of the Skrulls specifically, their role and their place in the MCU, what that means for like Marvel cosmic stuff, how those big intergalactic Marvel forces maybe are going to start to play together a little bit more. As for what we can expect from the kind of the meat of the show, how it's going to tackle its topics, the creators behind the show, Ali Salim and Kyle Bradstreet, had this to say. They said they were inspired by kind of Cold War era espionage dramas like John le Carre's Spy Came In From the Cold. It also said that Westerns were a big influence on the direction and the tone of the show. And then within that spy genre specifically, they touted shows like Homeland, The Americans, as well as the film The Third Man. These are like lofty ambitions for a Marvel show. You know, we've seen directors and creators before kind of pin their influences really high up, so who knows how well we'll see that track across these 6 episodes, but it's really heartening to hear such a strong direction being taken, especially for the kind of MCU fans who maybe want something a little bit more serious. As you can probably tell, we can talk a lot about what the show might contain in terms of tone and theme and how that's going to link kind of conceptually to the Secret Invasion source material, both the original 2008 mini and then the 2022 sequel. It's a little bit harder to pull on specific plot threads and specific ideas that might influence the MCU going forward. I think the main thing to look out for in the Disney Plus show is going to be where does it leave the Skrulls at the end. Both the 2008 book and 2022 book are positioned very differently in the Marvel Universe and take the Skrulls kind of from being major villains to something completely different at the end of the 2022 book, and I'm expecting us to follow a similar trajectory. In terms of characters that we'd love to see appear that make appearances during the original source material, I mean, Pie in the Sky, obviously, it would be great to see. The 2 characters I think that could make an appearance, maybe, would be Nova. These are really big claims, guys. Nova and maybe Teddy. We know Hulkling has got to be on his way somehow. Like, we're getting all of these casting rumours. The Young Avengers are being assembled across Disney Plus and all these different shows. And maybe, you know, if the Secret Invasion show, like the comic before it, ends up being about disparate groups of Skrulls that have different political ideas, then maybe a leader who has kind of one foot in planet Earth and one foot in kind of Skrull thinking could be a good character to introduce. and then we'd get Teddy, and then we'd get Wiccan and Hulkling, and all of our gay dreams would come true. So maybe that will happen, although we doubt it. And I guess finally, the last thing I wanted to say was, for a long time, the rumours were that Emilia Clarke was playing Abigail Brand in this show, which doesn't seem to be the case. Obviously, we spoke about she's playing a character called Gia, Talos's daughter. I do wonder whether that character of Gia is going to kind of end up being a hybrid of Abigail Brand from the comics, who's a character that we don't really have time to get into massively here, but Abigail Brand is like half human, half alien. She's a mutant. She runs sword. She's like really evil, but a really, really compelling character who thinks what she's doing is kind of the best for humanity, despite the way she goes about it. So if we get a little bit of Abigail Brand in Emilia Clarke's portrayal of Gia, I will be very happy. Okay, that's everything for now, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed digging back into the weird and wonderful history of mid-2000s Marvel comics. I did. I think it's interesting to think about how those comics were written, why they were written at the time, all the tie-ins that came out, even if the end product isn't the most amazing, absorbing comic. If you want more comics material and videos from us, I would recommend our video on She-Hulk. Ahead of the Disney Plus series, we dug into that character's history, again, some of the kind of creative decisions around her over the 40 years that she's been written. So that's a really good video to check out. And if you want more entertainment content, stay tuned to Digital Spy for more videos. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.